Well, I'm happy to be here with you guys, and we're here to celebrate camp's 50th anniversary. So why don't you introduce yourselves, tell us who you are.
I'm Dan Decker, past board member. Have been involved here at the camp for almost from its inception. My parents played an influential role in the beginning of the camp, and when they moved to North Carolina, these guys saw fit to bring me on the board, and so I've been involved with it since then.
I'm Dave King. I came back from overseas in 1968, and this guy next to me said, come work with me at camp. And so we worked for about 4 or 5 years at renting the state park and having camp for kids.
I'm John Phelan, and as Dave said, we worked in the state parks. And Dave asked me one day, he said, would you pray with me that the Lord will provide us with our own camp property? I said yes, but I had an idea it would be an awful lot of work. And little did I realize over the next half a century, it would be a tremendous amount of work. But I say in starting our interview today, to God be the glory.
Amen.
My name is Lauren Hugh Young. Used to be Lauren Moore, was my maiden name. And my parents, Charles and Elaine Moore, were involved in helping start the camp 50 years ago. I want to ask you guys to, maybe we could segue into talking about the genesis of the camp, like where the idea came from.
It started about 6 years before the camp started. I went for the first time to church camp out in Seattle. So I'd been on staff at camp. I'd worked at camp for 6 years, and then went into the service. When I came out of the service, I started working with Johnny at state parks. And so that planted the seed of what could happen at camp. I'd seen it done in a high quality way. And so we started, before we ever met to pray, your mom called Johnny and said, there's somebody that you need to meet in Murfreesboro, and that was Dr. Hackman.
So the reason that Dr. Hackman had an interest in this was that his daughter came to Christ through a Child Evangelism Fellowship, CEF, Good News Club, and she went home and shared the gospel with her dad. And by his own testimony, Dr. Hackman said, when I got saved real good. That's the way Bob would tell it. When I got saved real good. So he had this property, and that's where his heart was, that he had contacted Mom.
And he had tried to give this property to several Christian organizations, and they said, well, we'll just sell it and put the money into our funds. And he didn't want that. He wanted a camp here in Middle Tennessee for children. So we met with him for 3 hours. During that time, we had lots of questions for him. He had lots of questions for us. But we worked our way through all that. And at the end of that time, I think you took a $1 bill out of your billfold, didn't you?
I don't remember.
Okay. But anyway, that was the only money that changed hands.
Oh.
And we got 150 acres given to us, deeded to us that night.
And when we started, there was nothing here but woods. The first year, maybe I'm getting ahead of things, but we had no plumbing to speak of, no running water. Dave's wife and my wife did the cooking over an open fireplace and a little kerosene stove. And we had to go to the park to have our showers. So that was the beginning of Horton Haven. It was rough. No money, very little help. So the very first year, about 2 weeks before camp was to start, we had to change the name and make it Wilderness Work Camp.
At the end of the day, you were exhausted just from working.
And how many weeks of camp were that summer? Just the one?
2 weeks, I think, that we did a work camp, and that was the only camp we had that summer, because we had one cabin built. And I'm not sure where you stayed.
Little trailer.
A little trailer. Teresa and I stayed in the boys' bathroom that didn't have any fixtures in it. It was just a shell of a room. And my son, Kevin, who's now on staff here, stayed in there as a 5-year-old with us. And then the girls stayed in the other cabin, the other restroom, and that was camp.
What's your most memorable moment of the Lord's provision in relating to camp over the last 50 years? Maybe Johnny, you want to start?
Bud Shapp, who was part of our original construction staff, he said, I cannot do anything else till I get a wheelbarrow. We're digging foundations, moving dirt. I got to have a wheelbarrow. The camp did not have an account. We had no money, zero. Personally, I was broke. But I told Bud, I said, come on to Nashville, we'll get a wheelbarrow. So we went and we started out to Sears Roebuck to buy a wheelbarrow. We stopped at the mailbox. We had never received a gift for the camp. I said, Bud, let me check my mail. There was a check in the mail made out to Horton Haven for $500. You would be surprised at what kind of wheelbarrow you can get for $500.
I think one of the amazing ways that I have been able to see God provide since the very inception of Horton Haven is the people, the staff that He has brought here. From the very beginning, we had a retired couple that moved here and got the ball rolling with donated lumber from your dad. Kelton came on board. Kelton and Sharon Meyer came on board, and he was so qualified and could do so many things. And then I remember the day when they said that Matt Phelan had an interest in coming, and I'm thinking, because I have been involved in corporate business, and I'm thinking, Matt's got a great job. Why does he want to go to Horton Haven? And then I heard that he wanted to come to Horton Haven because he wanted to make and he wanted to do something that lasted for eternity. And I thought, wow, that's great. We probably haven't said enough about Bob. Bob was really an amazing guy. He was a medical doctor in Murfreesboro for several years. He was probably, probably 50 when he donated the land, something in that neighborhood. So he'd been a medical doctor in Murfreesboro for several years, had a great reputation, established a practice there. Scarlett, his daughter, inherited the land here, and we had an additional 200 plus acres that she needed to sell it, so it was going to go somewhere. Well, we wanted to have that property. And Dan's lack of faith, being on the board then, I can't remember if I was a chair then or not. I may have been, but anyway, I was. Okay, so I was as the chair then. I was trying to think, how can we make this happen? How if we got this amount of money from everybody, and then we borrowed this amount of money, and we financed it, or we did an internal financing or something, and I was trying to figure it all out. And as Lauren said, people started praying, and money just started coming in. And we I shouldn't say for them, but my faith was so small, but God provided cash we could pay with cash for that 200 plus acres that I never, ever thought, we don't have that kind of money, but God did.
All that happened in 6 weeks' time.
Yeah. And so that was a perfect example of what you're speaking of, that for me, I was trying to figure out how I could do it, and God said, I'll handle this.
Don't you worry, I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
And it's been a learning process for us as a board to trust the Lord that way, because at least on one occasion, maybe even two, we had gotten a loan approved and thought we were going to need it. The day that we were supposed to draw that money, the money came in. And when you see that happen, you begin after a while to trust God being great enough to do that. And
Wheelbarrow.
from the wheelbarrow up. And in the same way, it could be, a source of pride that we say, oh, we've never had to take out a loan. So we have to be humble enough to say, maybe we need a loan. And yet our experience has been that he has provided in time and often more than we need.
Well, one of the songs that we have sung here many, many times that sort of brings all this together as far as I'm concerned, I have determined to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. And I think, to me, that's been one of the great things to learn. We press on.
I've had the opportunity to be involved with not a great deal, but several Christian organizations. I've never been involved with one where I've seen God's hand more on the work than Horton Haven. I asked Matt, and numbers are not, we don't stress numbers here at camp, and yet I think it's scriptural, and I think it's also spiritual to take account of what's going on. I asked Matt one time, I said, Matt, tell me approximately how many kids are saved that come to Christ for eternity here at camp. What percentage? And he did a little calculation, and it's like 10%. So 10% of the kids that come here to Horton Haven leave on their way to heaven. And I'm thankful to be a part of that.
What impact has camp had on your families?
I can't imagine raising my daughter and son in any other setting. It's been wonderful to do that. They're going on for the Lord. Their families are growing spiritually. I remember when Kevin first started coming to camp as a teenager, and I'd say to him on Saturday morning, Kevin, the yard's got to be mowed. You need to get out there and mow the yard. And we'd go through this for about 15, 20 minutes, and I'd just say, get out and mow the yard. You mowed it at camp. Why can't you do it here? And he'd say, well, I was doing it for the Lord down there. But it just has really changed their lives. They're different people because of what God did here in their lives.
I do want to thank you all for being a part of this today and making time to sit down and do this. It is a treasure for me personally to be able to hear. And I know it's just going to be a blessing. I'm so glad to have this record that we can go back and mark all the ways. We could talk forever about the ways the Lord has provided, but just to have these moments to remember where we came from and where we're going. So I'm very thankful.
I think we have met our camp goal of creating a camp environment where people can come to know and follow Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And that's what it's all about.
I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back.